Welcome to Library Connection. I'm Mandi Cantrell, Youth Services Director at the B.B. Comer Memorial Library in Sylacauga, Alabama. Today for Library Connection, I've chosen a couple of books about, to meet some fascinating people. They're real people from history, stories that we might not have heard, so I want to share them with you. The first book is called All Star, Honus Wagner and the Most Famous Baseball Card Ever by Jane Yolen. "How about that?" said Honus Wagner after sharing a rousing story with friends or fans. In July 2007, a rare baseball card was sold at auction for almost $3 million. The player on the card was hatchet-faced, bandy-legged, and arguably the most famous shortstop baseball has ever known. His name was Honus Wagner. This is his story. That story begins on February 24, 1874, in Chartiers, Pennsylvania. It starts in the poor section of town in a house that stood a line drive from the railroad yard. The house was already crowded with family by the time the fourth surviving Wagner son came into the world. Named Johannes Peter, he was not a beautiful child. His legs looked like hunting bows. His arms were long. Later it would be said he could tie his shoes without bending over. He had a big nose and a large head. But his mother, Catherine, and father, Peter, thought he was gorgeous. They called him Hans, or more often, Honus. Chartiers was one of a number of little towns near Pittsburgh, all huddled around unpaved streets, as if the houses could be kept warm that way. The skies were constantly darkened by smoke from the city's many steel and iron mills. Settled by hard-working German immigrants like Catherine and Peter Wagner, the town would later be renamed Carnegie. The Wagner children grew up speaking both German and English. Honus learned to read and write in both languages in a small Lutheran church school that only went up to 6th grade. After 6th grade, there was no more school for boys like Honus and his brothers. They followed their father into the mines, walking along together before it was fully light on the paths well worn by the leather shoes of miners who came before them. Work ran from dawn to dusk, 6 days a week, so they carried the meal pails that Catherine Wagner had packed for them. When Honus was only 12 years old, he worked loading 2 tons of coal a day for 79 cents. A boy's pay, he called it. He began to pack on muscle. It was hard work, but good exercise, he would later tell a reporter. A miner's son learned not to complain. But the Wagners had Sundays off, and Sundays after church they played baseball. All the Wagner boys loved the sport. Honus got to try out many different positions on their family team, including pitcher. And though his legs were bowed, he could run faster than the rest, like an arrow flying along the base paths. His long arms helped him snag even the streakingest line drive. And after all those months loading coal, he was strong for a boy. In fact, he was as strong as many men. Often the Wagners played well into the evening, with only the gas street lamps to give them light. One time, Honus played on the Oregons, a team of local 12-year-olds. He came up to bat in the 9th inning with 2 outs and 1 man on, his team trailing by 1 run. Honus belted out a huge hit that scorched into the outfield. The crowd of miners and miners' sons called out, "Run, boy, run!" And he ran. Oh, how he ran. Those bandy legs pumping, his 12-year-old heart thumping, the cool wind blowing in his hair. But the boy on base in front of him was the slowest runner on the team. Honus couldn't pass him or the boy would be out, ending the game. Instead, Honus picked him up, slung him over his back, and carried him all around the base paths. When they were done, Honus dropped the boy onto the brick they used for home plate. Only then did Honus himself step on the brick, winning the game. How about that? At 16, Honus joined the Mansfield semi-pro team. He was 5'11" and nearly 200 pounds, and already known for his bowed legs, long arms, and great barrel chest. He called his huge hands scoops. They seemed too large for his baseball glove. He made his glove even smaller by cutting out a hole where the palm was and pulling out lots of the stuffing. He said he could feel the ball better that way. Any position that was open, he played. Often he was at shortstop or in the outfield, but sometimes he pitched. He didn't care. He just plain loved the game. Honus wanted to follow his big brother Al, already a pro on a Steubenville team 50 miles away. Al begged his manager to give Honus a tryout. The gruff manager made things hard. "He has to be here this afternoon by 2 o'clock. Well, the Wagners had no telephone, so Al sent a telegram. Now, in those days, 50 miles was a long ways away. The next passenger train would bring Honus in too late. But Honus wanted to try out so much, he made it happen. By hopping a freight train, then running from there to the field. He'd left home so fast, he'd come away without a uniform or glove or spiked shoes. When he borrowed his brother's spikes, his big feet split them apart. But barefooted, bareheaded, he pitched his way onto the Steubenville team. How about that? That year, Honus played with not one, but 5 different teams in 3 states trying to make a living in baseball. That year, his father broke an arm in the mines. Brother Charles lost his barber shop when the landlord stole his rent money. Honus fell against a picket fence and was badly gashed under his armpit, and some rotten thief stole 5 chickens from the family coop. But Honus had found his stride in baseball. He'd become known as a strong hitter, a fast runner, and a keen observer of the other players. His sweet temperament made the newspapers call him Old Reliable. Though he was only 22 years old, it was time, perhaps even past time, to be discovered. Ed Barrow, a baseball executive, heard about the young Pennsylvania phenom. One cold winter day, he tracked Honus down. Honus, wearing a derby hat with a chicken feather in the band, was at the railroad tracks with friends, throwing chunks of coal at a railway hopper. Simple to spot, he was the boy who never missed, hitting the hopper with loud, regular thunks. Barrow called out to the boys. Figuring him for a railroad cop, they ran like the dickens. It was easy to follow Honus, not so easy to catch him. But Barrow eventually caught up and offered him a place on a Patterson, New Jersey team. His pay? $125 a month. The average yearly pay for a worker then was $439. Honus jumped at the chance. Honus batted a .349 his first season. In his second season, he was bettering that by 30 points. When he was sold off to Louisville, a National League club, Honus Wagner was in the big leagues. Of course, the majors were not so major then. There were only 12 teams, and the rosters were much shorter than today. But it was where professional ball was played. His first year in the majors, Honus batted .344. The major leagues were called rowdy ball by some. Fans in the stands often threw bottles, gloves, and punches. At a game in Philadelphia, angry fans attacked the umpire, throwing bottles and cushions at him. Honus rushed to his side and, using his bat as a weapon, hit away all the missiles. He never missed. How about that? In 1909, the Pirates made the World Series against the Detroit Tigers and won in 7 games. Honus set 2 records with his odd windmilling run and his strangely bowed legs that looked like a large parenthesis. He stole 6 bases altogether, a record which stood for 58 years, and 3 of them in 1 inning, a record which still stands today. It was said that mouthy Ty Cobb called Honus names in that series, and that in return Honus tagged Cobb so hard right in the face during one game it loosened several of his teeth. But both stars denied this ever happened. Indeed, a play-by-play of the game proves Honus never tagged Cobb at second at all. But the legend persists. How about that? Honus had more home runs, RBIs, doubles, triples. He had more steals, and he played in more games than any other player in the National League. Clearly, he was a great baseball player. Some say the greatest baseball player ever, and he did it all without drugs or fancy training programs or million-dollar incentives, just for the pure love of the game. Honus's fans, young and old, collected everything about their hero, like the Colgan chewing gum ad in the Saturday Evening Post. He even had his own baseball card until he realized it was sold in cigarette packs. Since Honus did not smoke and he worried about his young fans, he had the card pulled off the market, saying that it gave them the wrong idea about cigarettes. Still, a small number of the cards had already gotten to the public. However, they were very rare, and in the years ahead, individual cards would be extremely valuable. Honus played 21 seasons of Major League Baseball before he had the courage to ask the woman he loved to marry him. They had 2 girls, Betty and Virginia. Honus called them "my 2 boys" and taught them to play the game he loved. He hunted, fished, played some basketball, and helped organize a small baseball league. But he missed the hurly-burly, the screams of the crowd, the dust from a sliding steel curling up into his nose, the thwacking sound of a ball hitting his glove. So he rejoined the Pittsburgh Pirates as a coach. And in 1936, when the Baseball Hall of Fame was established, Honus Wagner, the bandy-legged son of German immigrants, was one of the first 5 men inducted. How about that? Here is a picture of the T206, the real Honus Wagner baseball card. If you have a baseball card collector in your family, you may have already heard this story. But if not, I hope you've enjoyed hearing this story about one of the best baseball players ever, especially during this time when we're not able to watch sports on TV or participate at this particular time. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join us right after the commercial break with another story about another famous and fascinating person.
While you're at home with family for the next few weeks, don't put off scheduling home repairs. Call Ox Foundation for a free estimate. With more time at home, you tend to notice things you haven't in the past. Mold and moisture in your basement or crawl space, uneven driveways, stair-step cracks in your exterior brick, uneven floors and doors. If your home is showing weakness, it's time to get strong. How strong? Ox Strong. Stay strong, Alabama.
We're facing unprecedented times, and prayer and positive thought are antidotes for our anxiety. Please continue your prayers for our medical profession, our leaders, our first responders, and those afflicted with this virus. My name is Mark Ledbetter, president of the Coosa Valley Ministerial Association, and I encourage you to reach out to local pastors for any spiritual or emotional needs. God will see us through these trying times.
Coosa Valley Medical Center, one of the top 10 hospitals in Alabama, is also Silicaga's largest employer. Services from the emergency room, to surgery, to cancer treatment, to post-stroke care. You won't believe what's right in your backyard. It's Coosa Valley Medical Center in Silicaga. So, if you're sick in Alabama, choose one of the top 10 hospitals in Alabama. That is Coosa Valley Medical Center.
Marble City Pharmacy in Silicaga is your destination for the highest quality health care. Our knowledgeable pharmacists are always available for questions about your medications or advice on taking over-the-counter products and supplements. Our friendly staff can assist you in choosing from our full lines of compression hose and medical equipment. And don't forget our gift department. We have a great selection of unique gifts for every occasion. Stop by and see us today. Marble City Pharmacy, here for life.
A funeral service represents a family's final farewell to their loved ones. Knowing this, we go beyond what is expected to ensure the ceremony is beautiful and memorable, a truly fitting tribute to that special life. We invite you to visit us to meet our staff and tour our renovated facility complete with a new dining area and catering services. We've been serving the people of this area for over 40 years, and we think that you'll be pleased to find that making lasting impressions remains our first priority. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Silicaga, Childersburg.
WOTM is the television provider for all Alabama High School Athletic Association championship events and special programs. WOTM is your home for the Super 7 football, state finals basketball, baseball and softball state championships, the AHSAA weekly show, and WOTM also produced the first ever football playoff show, Super 7 preview show, and reclassification reveal show. Your exclusive home for all things AHSAA is WOTM. Contact your local cable provider to request WOTM to your channel lineup.
Things a little bumpy in your driveway? Ox Foundation Solutions has the expertise and the know-how to repair cracks, wet basements and crawl spaces, and uneven floors in your home. Ox Foundation Solutions will come up with the right fix for you. It's time to get strong. How strong? Ox Strong. Get a free estimate from Ox Foundations.
Hello and welcome back to Library Connection. The next book is called Stand Straight, Ella Kate, The True Story of a Real Giant. Most tall tales are made up, but my tall tale is true. I was a giant, a real live giant. I wasn't born tall. I was a little baby just like any other born in 1872. Mama and Papa named me Ella Kate. When I was still small, Papa went to the bank and borrowed money to buy a farm in a place called Rainbow, Missouri. He built a cabin from trees he cut with his own 2 hands. We were a little family, just Mama, Papa, and me. But I didn't stay little for long. When I was 7, I started growing at a most startling rate. Mama couldn't sew dresses fast enough to keep up, so she started adding fabric to the bottom of my favorite dress. "Stand straight, Ella Kate," Mama said when she was fixing my hem. But when Mama wasn't looking, I hunched my back so I'd look smaller. At school, I struggled mightily to fit my long legs under my desk, so Papa built a big desk for me. He brought it to school in a wagon pulled by horses. "Stand straight, Ella Kate, and show off your new desk," Papa said with pride. I guess he couldn't see how mortified I was. No other girl in my school needed a special desk or wore shoes as big as her paws, men's size 12. My best friend was a girl named Pearl. Just like her name, Pearl was small and beautiful. When I got teased at recess on account of my size, Pearl suggested we run away. "We'll hide you in a secret place where no one can find you," Pearl said. She was only trying to be nice, but where could I hide? I was too big for everything. I was too big for the world. When I was 13, I stood almost 6 feet tall. My classmates chose me to recite the Declaration of Independence at a big 4th of July celebration. I was surprised and honored. People from 3 counties would be there. I practiced for weeks. When it was time, I walked out on stage and began to recite the famous words. But I stopped cold when I heard voices from the crowd. "Would you look at that girl?" cried one man. "She's as tall as a barn." "Her hands are as big as skillets," laughed a woman. "I'll tell you what that girl is," yelled a boy. "She's a freak." I ran off the stage in tears. Mama was upset too, but she waited to cry until I'd gone to bed. "Don't worry," Papa said. "No one's ever treating Ella Kate that way again. We'll keep her safe inside this house for as long as she lives." From my bed, I listened, wishing I could climb inside the big night sky and hide there forever. But I kept growing. By the age of 16, I was 7 feet tall, and at 17, I was a foot taller. One day, a man visited our farm. He managed a museum in Chicago. "I hear you have a daughter who stands 8 feet tall," the man said. "My customers would pay good money to see that, and I'd gladly pay Miss Ella Kate for her time." Papa got mad. "Nobody's paying money to gawk at our girl," he fumed. But something in me trusted the man. "I believe I'll take that job," I said. And so, when I was 18, my parents and I boarded the train to Chicago. For 1 month, I wore a long dress and a serious expression for 7 hours a day while people stared at me. I made $1,000, which was a whole lot of money in 1890. Back then, you could buy 12 pencils and a bottle of ink for a dime. The following year, I received a letter from the man in Chicago asking me to return to his museum. This time, he wanted me to come for 5 months, and he offered to pay me $5,000. 5 months, Papa protested. "That's too long." "I don't mind," I said. "Mama can come with me. Besides, $5,000 is nothing to sneeze at, Papa. It's more than you can make in 5 years of farming. This was true, and Papa knew it. He laughed. I was becoming better at business than he was. I returned to Chicago in 1891, and for the next 6 years I traveled the country. I appeared in museums, exhibitions, traveling circus shows, and even a World's Fair. People paid 10 cents to see me stand in my fancy dresses. You couldn't blame folks for staring. After all, when I finally stopped growing at the age of 22, I stood a towering 8 feet 4 inches tall in my size 24 shoes. My hands were also impressive. Once, I removed a ring from my finger and gave it to a baby to wear as a bracelet. It fit perfectly. Other times, I held a $1,000 bill in my hand. Anyone who could reach the money unassisted was welcome to take it. No one ever did. After I had made enough money, I went back to Rainbow. The first thing I did was visit the bank that had lent Papa money to buy our farm. I paid off the debt. I figured it was the least I could do to thank Papa and Mama for all they'd done for me. Then I did something for myself. I bought some land and started building a house. I paid workers with my own money and told them to build my house with tall ceilings and high windows. I ordered custom-built furniture. Finally, I had a house in which I could stand up straight without stooping. I had the longest bed in town. I even ordered a custom-made buggy and bought a strong horse to pull it. Friends and neighbors liked to visit me at my new house. They always asked to hear about my travels. I told them about the big cities and newfangled automobiles I'd seen. I described the mountains and oceans. I even imitated the tigers and elephants that appeared with me in the circus. Most of my friends had never left home or seen such things. But the more I talked about my travels, the more I missed them. So, the year after I finished my house, I returned to work. I enjoyed my days as a circus show star. Sometimes my unusual size came in handy. When I was introduced to Mr. Charles Ringling at a dinner party in 1907, I was able to shake his hand without moving from my place at the end of the table. My friend, Little Lord Robert, thought that was a fine and dandy trick. Another time when a bellboy brought ice water to my hotel room, instead of opening the door, I reached through the transom and retrieved the pitcher from his hands. I hope it didn't give him too much of a fright. I always tried to be respectful, and I found that most people were respectful in return. Of course, there was always one person in every crowd who couldn't resist making a cruel joke about my appearance. More than one rude spectator stuck my leg with a pin to see if I stood on stilts. When that happened, I just whispered to myself what Mama and Papa always told me when I was growing up. Stand straight, Ella Kate. The more I said it, the better I felt. And the more I saw of the world, the more I wanted to see. Because as big as I was, the world was so much bigger. And I intended to see it all. Here is a picture of the real Ella Kate Ewing with her traveling companion, Maud Wilson. This was taken in 1907. And now I have a note from the author, Jane Yolen. Ella's condition, known today as gigantism, was poorly understood by doctors of the day who didn't know how to treat the gland disorder. After she began to grow at an abnormal rate, Ella suffered serious emotional distress. By all accounts, she was a shy, sensitive girl who disliked the attention her unusual appearance attracted. But as she grew older, Ella discovered that the very thing that made her cry as a child also made it possible for her to lead a remarkable life. For almost 20 years, Ella toured the United States and Canada as a star attraction in the biggest traveling shows of the day. Her size allowed her to witness many of the great events of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. At a time when most people traveled very little and women did not enjoy even the right to vote, Ella was both famous and financially independent. Between tours, she always returned home and shared her experiences with friends who could only dream of seeing the things Ella had seen. Ella's house became the social center of her county. Ella Ewing never married or had children. She died in 1913 at the age of 40, and her house burned to the ground in 1967. By then, even Rainbow, Missouri had disappeared from the map. Fortunately, those who knew Ella found a fitting way to remember her. Not far from the home Ella built in Scotland County, Missouri, rests the Ella Ewing Lake. Dedicated in 1969, the large reflective body of water is an appropriate tribute to the quiet woman still known in Missouri as the Gentle Giantess. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's just fascinating how she turned what many people would be a negative in her height and her unusual size. She turned that into a positive, and especially as a woman was able to see many things that her friends could not see at the time. Also, there's some other things in here I think is pretty neat. The circumference of Ella's head was 26 inches, her bureau was 6 feet tall, her bathtub was 6 feet long, and this is the actual size of Ella's glove. Her glove size was 24, which is a lot bigger than my hand. Also here, the average woman's shoe size today is 8.5. Ella's shoe size was 24. Here's the actual size of her shoe. Her bed was 9 feet 6 inches long. The average female height is 5'4". Her height was 8 feet and 4 inches long. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this, and we have lots of books just like this upstairs in the children's department. A lot of adults read upstairs. Don't ever be embarrassed to come upstairs and find some books. They're fascinating books about real people from history that you may not have learned about in school, but I find them very fascinating. So thank you for joining me on Library Connection.